Hansel and Gretel, retelling a story. Once upon a time there lived a poor family who was struggling to provide enough food for themselves. The father's new wife disliked his two young children, Hansel and Gretel. She believed that if the children weren't around, there would be enough food for her and the father. So the horrible stepmother spoke to the father in private about how he should take the children into the forest and leave them. At that moment, Gretel had passed by and overheard this conversation. She went to Hansel and told him everything that she had heard. He told his sister not to worry. He had a plan. 2 days had passed since then, and the father had finally been convinced. He asked the children to come to the forest with him to cut up some wood. The three walked far into the forest, and with every 3 steps, Hansel would drop a pebble that he had from his pocket, creating a small trail. That was his plan, you see. The night when Gretel had told him of the parents' discussion, Hansel had snuck out to collect a bunch of pebbles. When the father believed they had gone far enough, he told the children to wait there, for he would be back. But they knew he wouldn't be. After he was gone for a full 10 minutes, the children decided to head back using their pebble trail. Both parents were shocked when the children came back, but that wasn't going to stop their determination. That night, they made sure to lock the doors that led outside, and when the following morning came, the father took them out again, though not before Hansel could sneak a piece of bread into his pocket. This time, the father took them further into the forest, and when he was sure that they were deep enough in, he again told them to wait for him there. A few minutes later, Hansel and Gretel looked to find their breadcrumb trail that Hansel had been making as they had been walking into the forest. However, the trail was not there. Animals had gone into the crumbs. The children had wandered the forest for days, lost, hungry, and cold, until they stumbled upon a gingerbread house that was decorated with candy. Overjoyed at the sight, Hansel and Gretel rushed to the house and started to feast on whatever they saw that was edible. Suddenly the house's front door opened, and out came an ugly old lady with a cane. She asked the children if they wanted to come inside, where she had beds for them to sleep on and more delicious food. The children, of course, took that offer, and that night they slept with full stomachs on warm beds inside the ugly old lady's gingerbread house. The next morning, Hansel and Gretel were forced awake by the old lady. She shoved Hansel into a cage and commanded Gretel to start cooking and cleaning. The wicked old lady force-feeds Hansel to fatten him up, but luckily Hansel was cleverly thinking on his feet. He had noticed that the old lady was slightly blind, so he used a bone to pose as his finger and trick her into thinking he was way too skinny to eat. She has Gretel feed him lots of food for a few weeks, and then, becoming impatient, decides to just eat him. As the ugly old lady prepares the oven for Hansel, she decides to cook Gretel too. She tries coaxing Gretel into leaning in closer to the oven to see if it was hot enough. However, Gretel figured out what her intent was, so she pretended not to understand what the old lady meant. The old lady became more upset, and then, as soon as she bent closer to the oven to demonstrate, Gretel shoves the ugly old lady into the oven and slams and shuts the door. Gretel helps Hansel out of the cage. The two siblings find a vase full of beautiful jewels, which they shove into their clothes and set off to find home. When they find their way back home, their father is happy to see them. He tells them that the stepmother had died and he had been mourning their deaths. The family becomes rich and lives happily ever after. The end.